to it. This week, gentlemen, the name on the marquee has got to be Anatoly Malykhin, who this past Friday defeated Reinier de Ridder, becoming the one championship middleweight champion and the first three-weight champ in all of combat sports and all of MMA, or has that been done before by somebody else?
First simultaneous three-weight champ in major promotion history. Yes.
Okay. And let's talk about this real quick, the significance of this. Anatoly Malykhin, he is the one heavyweight champ, one light heavyweight champ, and one middleweight champ. And he dropped down this past weekend and faced Reinier de Ridder and took the middleweight champ from de Ridder. And he also took the light heavyweight championship from de Ridder as well. Mark, start us off. You watched the fight. After 3 rounds, or in the third round, rather, Malykhin overwhelms de Ridder and takes the middleweight title as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just to clarify quick, I didn't realize when you posed it to me that you mentioned all combat sports. I know it's first ever in MMA. I couldn't tell you all combat sports. There could be others.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
in
that's
that
what
regard.
I didn't. Yeah, obviously in boxing, there's like 8 or 9 division champs.
Yeah. But yeah. Anatoly Malykhin is a cyborg. I mean, he's just a handful, and especially for de Ridder, who can't really hang with him in the striking. And he did his best. He certainly came into this one with a much better game plan than he did the first fight between the two of them. He really did do a decent job of keeping Malykhin off him early. He made Malykhin work a lot harder for his entries. He found a lot of entries himself into the clinch to kind of give himself a chance to find something, which he didn't even really have that chance the first fight. Granted, he never could. He couldn't get Malykhin down. But even so, I thought he did well to prevent himself from being cornered and bombarded like Malykhin likes to do against the cage. He even dropped Malykhin at one point with that little jab calf kick combo that kind of knocked him off balance. That was nice to see. And maybe worst case, he figured, like, I'm going to survive into these later rounds. We're going to get into round 4. We're going to get into round 5. And I'm going to see where Anatoly's cardio is at. And then maybe the takedowns are going to come then. And he was kind of on his way to making that game plan work. I mean, Malykhin was stepping it up as the fight went on. In round 2, he started to get more and more dialed in. Some of those swarms started to come, body shots, dirty boxing. He was wearing on RDR. And again, it seemed like it was going all right for RDR, but I guess he was getting worn on way more than it even looked like, because then in early round 3, we get that odd finish where he shoots and he gets stuffed and Malykhin gets on top. But even then I'm like, oh, okay, grappling opportunity here for de Ridder. Like, let's see what happens. And yeah, a few punches are landing from Malykhin, and the one knee did land, but even the knee didn't seem to affect RDR that much in the moment. And then Malykhin decides to separate and stand up, and RDR is just sitting there. And then he doesn't get up. And it was very weird. Like, you're like, wait, like, that's it? He's not going to get up? So I can't believe that's how that thing ended. It didn't. There was no like obvious moment for us as fans to be like, oh, I get it, why he's not getting up here. You know, it was just one of those ones where I guess he really got worn on and he didn't have much left. So odd finish, but either way, as we said, we have our first ever simultaneous 3-division champ in a major promotion. And I know it's one, which isn't too stacked in the heavier weight classes. So we have to be fair about that. And also, it's a little bit easier with the rehydration in one because the weight classes are 205, 225, and heavyweight. So everything's a little closer together there. But as much as I'm going to give you those facts, just because they are the facts, and I feel like we have to say those things, I'm also going to tell you that it is an incredible achievement either way, and that Anatoly Malykhin probably deserves more of a spotlight in MMA than he's even getting right now. So, huge night for him.
Omar, let's bring you in here. What were your thoughts of how this fight plays out with Malykhin seemingly overwhelming and accumulating damage on RDR throughout the fight to the point where RDR basically, it's almost like he retires, but that's obviously when it's in the middle of rounds, but it was like he retired during like a break in the action.
Yeah.
He was like, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
He was done. I mean, the fight didn't go very well for him. It did look like he put a lot more work into his uh training as far as his body was concerned. He looked like, and I think Mark alluded to it before, he looked much more in shape, much more athletic in general while he was in there. But the problem is Malykhin is a tank, right? Like the other thing that I think he's really underrated for is his footwork. His footwork is fucking phenomenal. That dude's has a base under him at all times for the most part. He was off base a couple times here and there. After De Ritter cut a couple angles, he got caught bull charging. Got matadored a little bit, but that was very few and far between. But I think what I really loved about his footwork is that he was able to cut off De Ritter in almost every regard. There were a few times where De Ritter ended up against the cage, and I don't think he ended up being wanting to be there, let alone even realized that's where he was. But he was kind of lulled into that spot. And De Ritter played a game where he waited a little too much. I think he's, again, relying too much on a takedown on a guy who's very possibly not going to get taken down by you. And pulling guard is a dangerous game against a guy who can beat on you from top. And so I just don't think there were a lot of avenues there for De Ritter, and he just looked really uncomfortable in there. Less so maybe than the first round, and I think that had to do more with his physical preparation for that fight. But in the end, man, you can't walk back the entire fight and not suffer the consequences from a cardio perspective, but also from a mental perspective as well. Malykhin walked him down the entire fight and just absolutely brutalized him towards the end. To be honest, man, once he got on top, those shots may not have looked like clean, like, you know what I mean, like nothing. Those shots look like they sucked. Like, I not necessarily blaming Homeboy from being like, you know what, I'm not getting the takedown here. Pulling the gazeve, if you will, right? Can't do much. Call it quits.
Okay, here is a question. Well, it's really a question for Mark, but Omar, feel free to contribute as well. So Malykhin now, he stays undefeated as a professional. His 6th consecutive win under the One Championship banner. So he's now 14-0. All 14 of his fights, he has won by a finish. Okay? It is 4th consecutive title fight for one. He's won all of them. He's finished all of them. As you just alluded to a moment ago, obviously compared to other promotions, especially in MMA, you might say that one is not on the same level overall talent-wise. And obviously he's only been with one for 6 fights. And before that, he had 8 other fights in other promotions, other smaller promotions, of course. But 14-0 is 14-0. And 14 finishes is 14 finishes. Have you considered where you would put Malykhin in your heavyweight rankings? I mean, he has 3 titles in 3 different weight classes, but where would you fit him in terms of the rankings that as you see them in the UFC?
Dude, I mean, it's fairly impossible to say, because there's no points of comparison to, like, none of these guys that he has beaten outside of the only real one is Arjun Buller, who did have a short time in the UFC, wasn't able to do much. He was kind of, I mean, he could have done more. There was some contractual thing where they ended up just letting him go. But even so, he didn't make many waves when he was here. De Ritter's never fought any of these guys in Bellator and PFL, or he's never crossed paths with any of these guys. So it's really hard to make a point of comparison. Like, do I think he is a top 10 UFC heavyweight? I don't know that I'm ready to say that. Again, just simply because of the caliber of opponent. Do I think he could beat guys beyond that level? Yeah, probably. Like, I think he's I mean, let's who's ranked heavyweights right now, because heavyweight ain't that deep.
I'm gonna be honest, man. If I just thinking about the main event that happened this past weekend, I kind of think Malykhin chews the 2 of them up. To be honest,
think he beats Rosenstrike, man.
I do. And
wow.
And full disclosure, we're gonna get to
That's
this
how
fight.
it works with what I'm saying.
Rosenstrike, actually, that's probably one of the better versions of Rosenstrike I've seen as far as a total game was concerned. You know, he
Oh,
didn't
I
get
agree.
again, we'll get there, but I do say that, not trying to shit on Rosenstrike. I thought that was a fantastic performance he had this weekend. I just think Malykhin is just athletically, I just think he's better. And I just think his pace and his footwork allow him to walk dudes down. And he can definitely beat Rosenstrike in a contest of power, because that dude cracks.
To me, top of my head, without him having proven anything more yet, I think I'd be slotting him in around the bottom of the UFC rankings, like toward that number 14, 15 area. I don't think I'm ready to say he's better than like a Jairzinho Rosenstrike. But point is, we're debating it. He may very well
Yep.
be. And it's, as fans, it's a little bit of a shame that we may not get this answer. I mean, how old is Anatoly Malykhin while we're having this conversation quickly?
That's a great question.
38.
That's what I
Oh,
thought.
wow.
He's 36. Yeah, I thought he was up there. So we're, this emergence is a little bit late. I mean, for a heavyweight, I guess it's not the end of the world.
Well, by Mike's standards, he's half dead. So,
But to kind of blend into the idea of who he would fight next, this is sort of where I was going to go with this. It's like the level that he has hit right now, taking out 3 of your champions, holding all these belts at once, and you made the decision to let him do it, to say, you know what, yeah, I know you have 2 of our belts locked up, put those on hold and go get a third. Like, you allowed all this to happen. If you're one, you have allowed him to become this like mega star over there, and you don't really have anyone ready for him to fight in any of these weight classes. Like, Ali Akbari just beat Arjun Buller on this card. He's probably the number 1 contender at heavyweight now. Heavyweight's probably the easiest to sell, just because you're like, look at this huge guy that he has to go against. But like, Malykhin already knocked him out. Like, there's not really anyone interesting. So I almost feel like their best course of action is to try to look outside the organization and set up some kind of super fight. We haven't really seen one do that. Obviously, we've seen like Ryzen do that with their connection with Bellator. Now we have PFL and Bellator merging. So you never know what could come. But it just feels like there's nothing, or maybe one could sign someone I'm trying to think who's even floating out there, like a Dos Santos or some shit like that, if you ever convince him to do it, like just for the name. But based on the guys on their roster, it doesn't feel like they have anyone who is even worth booking against Malykhin right now. So it's an odd scenario.
Yeah, man. Omar, any other thoughts you want to contribute to that conversation?
I mean, it's a valid point. I think his, as much as we love one, the name value and the recognition that he's going to get there from the opponents that he has is probably never going to get him to a place where his resume will, I think, properly reflect where he should be in the MMA rankings. What I think he could potentially do against guys who are in the top of the world rankings, if you will, or the even UFC rankings, PFL rankings, that kind of deal. I'm interested to see what the future looks like for Malykhin, because obviously contracts will eventually come to an end, but it would be interesting to see him against some of these top guys.
He seems very married to one. Like, he is in love with being in one.
Sure.
He says it constantly. So
we'll see how long one has, man. Those rumors haven't really gone away. You know what I mean? They haven't gotten worse. They haven't gone away.
Yeah. But, you wonder if he thinks about what I just said. Like, if they start coming to him with, how about you fight this guy? And he's like, that doesn't really seem so fun. So then you wonder if it'll happen for him, where he's like, can't you guys get me something better? So people can see how good I am. So you're right. You never know how this develops.
Yeah. So it's the second time that Malykhin has faced Reinier de Ritter, and at both times he has taken gold from RDR. RDR is going to call the cops and be like, somebody come arrest this man. He keeps taking my stuff like a bully.
The shine comes off him a little bit, of the man who used to say that he would tap Adesanya if he had the chance.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
styles make fights. But that being said,
yes.
In terms of that, yes, Anatoly Malykhin definitely has a style that tops Reinier to Ritter, and